Hi, everyone. Welcome to my Thursday night hangout. I'm so happy you could come tonight. And I'd like to see some of the regular people showing up every week. And I thank you for your support and thank you for coming and listening to the show. Tonight we had some technical difficulties. It's quite warm here in San Diego. And you start putting all the lights on in the studio and the computer doesn't like it. So we had to kind of crank up the AC. So I'm going to just go along here. It's starting to cool down, so it'll work pretty well. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about one of my favorite topics. I'm going to start up the movie here in a sec. And rental income. And so I'm going to talk to you about how to find good tenants. So let me go ahead and play the video and I'll get started on the actual show. So welcome to the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome to my Thursday night hangout for real estate investors. I do it every Thursday night at 6 p.m. Tonight we had a few difficulties. So if you're watching the YouTube channel, you won't see the chat and the polls on the side, but I will give you links to get any of the resources that I talk about in the show. And if you're watching the replay on the webinar, you'll actually see those clickable links on the right. And if you have any difficulties questions, type them into the chat. If you're watching from Google Plus, welcome. Please type in where you're hanging out from and your name will show up automatically. And also if you're watching the actual webinar in Webinar Jam, go ahead and type in where you're hanging out from. So I hope you all enjoy. If you're watching from Facebook, welcome. I'm glad you can watch on the new 22 Social app on Facebook. And if you're watching on my website, welcome as well. So we're kind of broadcasting simultaneously on all those different channels. And again, thank you so much for being here. And I'll monitor the chat periodically, and I can answer some questions at the end. If you type them in, please go ahead and mark them as a question. There's like a little checkbox there, so I know where the questions are. So let me just check and see. I'm Janice Bell, and I'm hanging out from San Diego. So if you type in where you're hanging out from, we'd all appreciate that. All right, so, and everyone kind of filled out the poll, I hope. How many deals have you done? How many wholesales, rentals, and flips? That helps me gauge what I'm going to talk about to the audience for future webinars. So I really appreciate you participating in the poll for me. All right, so I'm going to start the slides. As you might have seen in the webinar sign up, I've been a landlord since '89. I started quite young. Just turned my first condo into a rental as soon as I could. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I got started and then jump right into some of the knowledge and things that I've gained over the years that would really help you with your rentals. You can profit from the mistakes that I made so you don't do the same mistakes. And, that's where I feel that, I can provide value for you guys by doing that. So I do have a slideshow prepared, and then I also have some free gifts, giveaways of some forms that I use that I've found over the years really work to help me rein in the best tenants and retain the best tenants, and then have leverage when they turn out to be not so good tenants. So I'm going to share all that with you guys tonight. All right, I'm going to just check the chat, see if there's any more questions. All right. So let's go ahead with the slides. I'm going to go ahead and start the slideshow. All right, so tonight, here's the slideshow. I'm going to talk about how to find good tenants. And on the right is one of the first properties that I bought as a rental, as opposed to some that I had bought previously and lived in and then moved out and turned into a rental. So this one is in Detroit, that little yellow house on the right. And I bought it from another investor who was wholesaling some of the deals that she had found. The one on the left is a 9-unit apartment building, and I did that with a 1031, and that was in the capital of Michigan, in Lansing. So how did how did it all get started? I was in the biotech industry and I got laid off in 2003. At that point, I had 3 rentals, and I'd been a landlord on those 3 rentals for quite a long time. And I had a big mortgage on my new house and 6-month-old twins. So I really had to get my my income back up there. And since there really weren't any jobs because the stock market had crashed in 2002, biotech was just not doing well in San Diego. So I started looking into real estate, read everything I could, went to every seminar that I could go to, and just started to learn as much as I could about it. I took all the training, a lot of the training that you guys have done as well. So here was the first condo that I had as a rental that I mentioned. I kept it as a rental, just like the picture on the left, for a very long time. Somehow I'm not seeing my desktop at this point. It all moved away. There we go. So I kept it like that. And when I went to sell it, after I'd owned it about 20 years, I remodeled it and put in all the tile and a new stove and, the whole new sink, and we painted the cabinets, and that's how I sold it. So that was a rental for a long time. This was another rental that I had. It was a 3-bedroom, 2.5-bath townhouse. And I renovated this inside as well before I sold it, after the tenants had been in there a while. This is a townhouse in Southern California in San Diego County that I still own. We renovated all the floors with tile and nice hardwood. And that's what I would call a higher end rental. It attracts a lot nicer tenants and they're a lot easier to deal with. So I'm going to kind of contrast. Actually, all 3 of those were nice ones that I owned at first, just because, I'd lived in them myself, so they were pretty nice. If you talk about the tenants that are in these kind of houses, that's a whole different ball game. And I'm going to compare and contrast what you need to do to make sure that those rentals work for you as well. So let's go further on the show. So I did my real estate investor education, like I said, with all the seminars. So in 2006, 5 and 6, I accumulated a lot of properties. And so in those 3 years between 2003, I'd say I really didn't start buying till late 2004. In those 2 to 3 years, I built up so that I owned 60 units. And those included some apartment units. And that's why I was able to, buy one building that had a number of units in them, plus a lot of single family homes. So that's kind of how it all got started. I went from being a scientist, not knowing that much about real estate, to being kind of a big time landlord with 60 tenants and one full-time and 2 half-time employees to keep the whole thing running. So tonight I'm going to talk about how to buy a rental property, step number 4, which is how to find good tenants. And if you go to my YouTube playlist at Wise Wealth University, you will find a playlist that includes all the steps in this process. So I've gone through step 1, 2, and 3. I'll do a quick review there, but I'm going to refer to this real estate matrix thing to the right, and I do email that to all the subscribers once they've been on my list and they come to my Hangouts. A landlord, you can see here in the middle in green, a landlord needs cash, credit, and some skills. He does need time, he or she, but he doesn't need as much time as a flipper does. So with the landlord, I say those are the 3 3 things you need: the resources, cash, credit, and skills. So I'm going to talk about, how those things all come together. Tonight, it's going to mostly be about skills, but the review will cover, cash and credit. So quick review in step 1 is you need to find the property. This is not from the internet. This picture I took in Texas of a house that the elderly lady has been in senior assisted living for probably 2 or 3 years, but everyone said it was a gorgeous house before that. So how quickly the weather and neglect can have an effect on a property. So if you want to find some rentals, call some agents, walk through as many deals as you can, and you want to find a place that needs some work, but it's also not the best house on the street, so you can get some value out of it. You can also call a lot of wholesalers, find people who put up these signs, get on their mailing list, and they will email you every time they have a new deal. Call the bandit signs and also look for them on Craigslist. When you find one, you can buy the first one or two in your name or in a land trust. I prefer the land trust. You don't need to use an entity like an LLC or an S Corp until you've made some money to afford to cover the expenses of running that thing and having your accountant and things and your extra taxes for those. So this is a property that I bought in Detroit. I probably had bought 7 or 8 houses before I bought this one. So I like the brick ones. I still own this as a rental. And that's the before and after picture of the house. So we painted the shutters blue, but we kept the gray. It's really just gray brick, and there's no maintenance involved in that. And we put on a new roof. All right, so step 2 in the review, I'll step through these quickly and we'll get into the meat of tonight, which is really about the finding your tenants. So step 2 is find the cash. You can use, and I'll just list them out here for you, conventional mortgages, in which case you need to repair your credit. You can use seller financing and subject to, a beautiful way to buy rentals. A 1031 exchange, I've done 2 of those into larger apartment buildings. Credit card checks, I've bought houses with just written 2 checks from 2 different credit cards. They had 0% interest. So by the time I finished the rehab, I was ready to refi those into a regular mortgage. I had 0 interest for those months that I was rehabbing it. You can refinance another property or put a HELOC on another property and use that cash. You can use partners and joint venture agreements. Check again with my YouTube channel. We did a quite extensive interview with Jay Sherman a few weeks ago where he talks all about how to do JV agreements with your partners. You can wholesale a few to get the cash to buy the rental. This is another one of those houses in Detroit I was mentioning that I had bought initially. And this one, that's the one I showed you. I think it had white trim at first. We finished this up and it looked a lot nicer after we did the rehab. You can use hard money. It's hard because it costs a lot and it's hard to repay back. So I prefer to find private lenders and equity partners. If you do that, you can use any situation, you can do it with any property, and you can use any amount of money. So if you need to do that, get my ebook on finding private lenders, and that's wisewealthuniversity.com/PV lending. I think I might have the link as well in the next slide. So a review of step 2 is you need to find the cash, get over your fears and limiting beliefs about private lenders. Look me up on Facebook at Wise Wealth University, and also go to that website and download the ebook. And I will click on an offer later on in the show, so you can just click right from the webinar and go ahead and get that. If you're not watching it on the webinar, and if you're on YouTube later, just go to this link here, wisewealthuniversity.com/PV lending. All right, step 3 in the review is you need to fix what's the right way to rehab rentals. A couple weeks ago, I did a whole show on this. That's also on the YouTube channel. Where can you find your contractors? We reviewed that. REI clubs, the internet, referrals, local ads, Craigslist and Angie's List, and driving and looking at the signs. This is a 6-plex that I own in Salt Lake. Right now it needs a paint job, so that's going to be a cost to me this year in 2015. The upper picture is what the basement looked like when we bought it, and we tore out all the old wires, all the junk, and that's after we cleaned it. That's what it looked like. It was just junk down there. And the middle picture is what it looked like after we painted it and made it into a new laundry room. And that's me actually there in my camo pants, because one of the first properties that I did, we were doing a lot of our own work. We rented a sprayer and sprayed this whole thing, make it pretty. So that's how you find your contractor. So let's jump right into step number 4 for tonight's show, which is how to find good tenants. To find good tenants, we're going to move now into having people skills and having the right forms. And you put those two things together, and you're going to be successful with having good tenants. All right, so let's move on. So I put these forms here. You're going to get these forms later, so don't worry about them. They're small here, but it was just to show you what I'm going to be giving you later in the show. All right, so step number 4, how to find good tenants. On the right is a before and after picture of one of my rentals, again, in Detroit, where we renovated the kitchen a bit, but we kept the cabinets because, again, it is a rental. You can advertise online. You can put out a postlets, which goes to a lot of different websites, and you can advertise on Craigslist. But when you advertise online, you have to be careful, because your success depends on the market, and it depends on the tenants in that market. Well, let me give you a good example. If your tenants don't own a computer, they're not going to see postlets, and they're not going to see Craigslist. So what we do in those markets, and again, I'm putting up pictures of a rental that we're renovating right now up in Sacramento, California. So that's kind of the small bedroom. I mean, they look pretty nice, but that's the kitchen. We kept the cabinets, and we painted the cabinets. We put on a new countertop. We didn't take out the cabinets and put in brand new ones like we would on a flip. So we use bandit signs to find good tenants in areas where they don't own computers, or they speak Spanish and they're just not going to look on the computer. So we even use Spanish bandit signs there. So it is more direct when they have no computer, and you're going to have to do more talking on the phone, because, you know, they're going to call you and ask you questions. Those questions could be answered in the ad, but since they can't look at an ad, you're going to have to do more talking on the phone. So we suggest just have your cell phone in there, or a track phone that you don't want, you know, people to have your cell phone number. Just use a cell phone, the track type cell phone number that you can use just for the rentals, or use Google Voice and have it the number forwarded to your phone. All right, another way to find good tenants is to use open houses. This is one of the rentals we have down in San Diego, and I mentioned before that we renovated and put in a nice hardwood floor. Now, we have people in this rental that have good paying jobs, and because they do, we want to show it to as many people as possible and get a good, reliable tenant in a very nice property and have them take care of it. So many times the tenant in this property is in transition. They have been a homeowner at one time in their life, or they aspire to be a homeowner, and they're in transition. And so they're either back to being single, or the kids have moved out or something. And so we have an open house, and we show it, and we get an idea of what they're like when they come through the property. So we get a good sense of that for putting in several hours of work and seeing a number of people at once, rather than making appointments and having people not show up. So I'm going to move into application forms. Now, the reason I put this fireplace here on the right is it reminds me of a flip that we did, where we remodeled this house into gorgeous condition and thought, oh, a new family is going to be in this house. And it turns out that the people who bought it from us made it into a rental right away. They wanted something completely done. They had the money and not the time. So as soon as they bought it, it became a rental. And I'm sure they have good tenants in there. It's very close to that other property that I just showed you of mine. In fact, it's right down the street. So what do you need to do to find good tenants? Well, you use your application form, and on it, there's two pieces of information you must absolutely collect. And the reason you have to collect this information is it is used for the credit check. It's also later used for collections when things don't go right and you need to put something on their credit report. And I'm going to give you this application. It is on my resources page at wisewealthuniversity.com/resources. There is a link there that you can download that application. It's the one I use. So I'm going to go over to that application right now and screen share the application. Let me see if there's another thing I have to talk about here. No, we're gonna do to the application and then go back to the slides. So hold on while I switch, and I will pull up the other form that I want to show you. All right, so here's the application, and I'm sorry that it doesn't show. Well, let me scroll it up a little. There we go. So here's my rental application, and you'll notice in the top that each adult 18 or older has to fill out a separate application, and that's so I can run their credit check. You'd be surprised how many parents move out and leave their quote-unquote adult children, and now you don't have any way to evict them because you don't have any information on them. Also, if they have a vehicle or something, you need to know what's going on. There's a non-refundable fee of $25 per adult, and that's because you're going to run their credit check, and the credit check's going to cost you money, so you need to be reimbursed for that. So you fill it out, you get their current residence, and I suggest you call not the current residence, but the landlord before that, and find out anything you can about them. The landlord they're in now, the house they're in now, that landlord either likes them a lot or wants to get rid of them. And because of that, they'll give a glowing reference either way, and it's hard to tell the difference. Okay, they want to get rid of them. Employment history. I want you to call their current employer. All they'll do is verify that they work there. If you call the previous employer, sometimes they can give you more information about that person. Often not. It depends on what kind of employer it is. But the current one will verify that they've got the money to move in. Ask for, a bank account and any credit that they have at the time, and their vehicles, because you're going to need to know about the number of vehicles there, license plates, etc., especially if you're in a townhouse and they have an HOA. Emergency contacts in case something happens. I know this sounds bad, but we did have a tenant who died, but did not die in our property. They bought the townhouse next door and then they died. And so if they had been in our townhouse when they died, we would have needed this emergency contact information because it was a single woman and there was no one else in the property with her at the time. So some other general information. Have you ever gotten late notices, filed for bankruptcy? Some people will be honest about that. Some people won't. They're going to sign and date it. And by signing it, they're agreeing that you can run their credit check. And I will tell you more about how to do that specifically, because this is something that seems to be run by mortgage people. And how do you, as a lowly landlord, get a chance to do that? So we may run a credit check, and I give them a chance to say, is there anything negative we will find that you want to let us know about before it happens? You'll notice up here we have their birthday, their social, and their driver's license. Now, these are the two critical pieces I mentioned in the outline. You need their birthday and their social security. When you go to run the credit check, it doesn't just pull up their name, it cross-references it with the social security and the birthday to make sure you have the right person. So those are the two key pieces of information you need. A lot of people just used a lease. If you just use a lease, you will not have their birth date or social security on the lease, because that's not something you request on a lease. So if you forget the rental application, you'll find out that later you don't have the right information. And I will tell you in a bit how you can get rid of, when you do get rid of these people, you can report to their credit report using the social and the birthday that they owe you money. So it does show up. It does show up on their credit report. It doesn't mean you'll ever collect, but it's something you can send to collections and you might make some money on it. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the slides. Here we go. All right, so that's why you need to collect that information on the application form. Now, in the next slide, I'm going to talk about this thing called a binder deposit. And why do I need this? I mean, you may have never heard of it before, but I found it to be very convenient and come in handy many, many times. So I'm going to switch over and talk about that. It's used for your security as well as the security of the tenants. It is used to help you collect money and get the tenant to feel safe about giving you money. Have you ever talked to people who've given a deposit to some guy outside of a house and it turns out they don't own the house and they can't get the money from that person? This form takes care of all those worries. It's also really important if there's any time delay between moving it, between a deposit, to hold it for a future move-in later in the month or at the first of the month. And it's also very helpful with out-of-state properties. If you ever do manage out-of-state properties by yourself for any reason, you'll want to use this deposit. And I think I'm going to do a future one telling you exactly how to go through those steps, because it's very convenient. If for some reason you either lose your property manager and I'll tell you why you want to use this. You would have a very nice property out of state. And sometimes when you have a nice property out of state, you can have tenants that will take care of it and find people to do repairs. And you don't really need a property manager. And number one, you're collecting such good rent, you would be paying a high price for that property manager. So if it's out of state and it's low income, you definitely need a property manager to, boots on the ground and bang on the doors. If it's a very nice property, you can handle it this way with the benefit and that added protection of a binder deposit. So I'm going to switch over again and show you how to do the binder deposit. Okay, I'm going to share that. Okay, now the binder deposit, let me just find it here on my screen. Okay. I have blacked out, personal information on this binder deposit. This is a binder deposit I got apparently from the Landlord Protection Agency. I don't remember exactly where I downloaded it because I've been using it for so long. And I'm giving you the blank form on my website. Again, wisewealthuniversity.com/resources. You can see I used this just recently, about a month and a half ago, and we were signing up someone who wasn't going to sign the lease right away, but we wanted to make sure we took a deposit so that they were bound and we were bound. And that is what a binder is for. It binds you both to the agreement and there's money exchanged. So it says received from the tenant's name, the sum of how much money they gave you as a deposit, and the name and the address of the property. And I wanted the balance of the first month's rent to be paid by the first of the month. That was when they were going to move in. It turns out these people backed out. They actually the boyfriend had found another rental at the time. And this is something really, really important. And I always, even very experienced investors that are friends of mine, and I run into this conversation with me and they say, well, I'm going to collect the first month's rent, and then the rest of it's going to go towards the security deposit. And I'll collect the rest of the security deposit later. And I say, no, stop. We're not going to do that. You're not going to do that. And here's the reason why. You cannot evict someone for lack of a security deposit. You can always evict someone for not paying the rent. So whatever amount of rent your tenant has, I want you to apply that to the security deposit, have the rest go to rent, and if they've got a shortfall between those two payments, the shortfall should be in the rent. Now, when they don't come up with that other half of the rent, you can start evicting them right away for not having the rent. And that's what I did in this case. It says if the landlord signs this agreement, this deposit is to be applied to the security deposit. That was the deposit of $850 they were willing to bring to the meeting to hold the property. In this case, they never made it to the meeting. They called us and canceled. The other half will be rent. They're going to bring half on June 1st, which is the rent, to get them in for half the month. And then on the 15th, they're going to owe the other half of the rent. So remember, security deposit first, the rest goes to rent, and then you parcel it out by day and say, okay, when you get paid on your next check, that's going to be the middle of the month, and that's when you're going to owe me the other half of the rent. That way, you could start eviction on June 15th because they only paid for half a month. Okay? So that's what I want you to do. And that will be specified as well in your lease. So the above property, we were going to let them move in kind of it was vacant already, and we were cleaning it out. They were going to be able to bring some stuff in on the last day of May. It specifies the rent, and the lease would be signed probably on May 31st before I let them in. I said June 1st here, but I really meant May 31st. I think we weren't going to be in town that day. So, and they would be giving $850 as a security deposit. And it also specifies which utilities we need them to turn on. I wasn't going to be supplying any utilities at that point. And I crossed out the thing about the broker's commission because there's no broker involved. And then you sign it, and that was my company down below. So that's what you need to do for the form. I have this form again for you on the website, Wise Wealth University. So you can go ahead and I might be able to get that for you. And I'll show you. Well, I don't have the page up right now, but go to wisewealthuniversity.com/resources. What I'm going to do is put that, stop screen sharing here for a second, and I'm going to give you a link to those resources. All right. So if you're in Webinar Jam, the link's on the right. It's called Property Management Resources. And if you click on that link, you'll find all the forms that I talked about on how to find good tenants. So there's a button there that says, take me to the forms, download, and just go there and it'll take you to the page, and then you can download those forms. They're right there on the page. There's a lot of other resources on the page, phone numbers, domain names, property management software, a lot of different other links. So go ahead and look through that if it's something that you need in your business, in your flipping business, as well as your rental business. So I'll leave that form up there. If you're watching it later on YouTube and you're not in the webinar, go ahead and just go to my website. And it's the, let's see, I always forget how to do this. It's right there. And then do .com/resources. All right, I have a couple more forms to talk to you about, and I don't have those to give away. I'm giving away the application and that binder deposit. So I'm going to go back to the slides. All right, so that's what you use the binder deposit for. So we've got an application form with information. The binder deposit makes everybody feel safe, and you can use it for out-of-state properties. And I'll go through that on a different webinar. So here's the order of things you have to do. And here I put two pictures from, one of my move outs on one of those Detroit houses. It doesn't really show how bad the kitchen looked, but that's the way they left the house. And there's a broken window there that they kind of taped it up. So here's the order. You need to advertise. You need to then show the property and have them fill out an application, collect the application fee. You need to then go run the credit check. And I'll show you in a minute exactly where to go to for that. It's also, if you go to the forms download that I'm showing, the resource page on my website, there's a link there to Mr. Landlord. Mr. Landlord's website is where I run my credit checks. So you can apply there to run credit checks. They're going to want to make sure you either shred your documents, keep a password on your computer, or that you have a locked office. So that's just to keep information safe that people have submitted to you. Okay, so I'm on number 4, the credit check. And then you need to call the references on the credit check. You need to call their employer references to verify that they work there. I have called one where the person didn't work there and they still put that information down on their app. And then they didn't call me back when I called them to figure out what was going on. And you need to call not the landlord of the place they're in now, but the prior landlord. I once did that and found out, actually, I think it was the former landlord, and found out the guy had a record for child molestation. He wasn't supposed to be around any kids, but he now had a girlfriend with kids, and he wanted to move into my house. So needless to say, I did not accept that guy. And even his parole officer started calling me and asking me what kind of truck he had put on the application, because he had changed his truck. So they were trying to catch him because they're supposed to know what his truck looks like. Okay, so then you need to select from the people that applied. You need to select the one that you want to put into your property. You're almost like hiring this person because they're going to be paying you out of their paycheck. So it's really important that you select the right person. You're going to then collect the deposit, and that's where you would use that deposit binder. It binds you both to a deposit agreement. Then you would use a lease. Now, I'm not giving that out right now because it's a lease that I received from taking a course with Dave Lindahl, who teaches about apartment buildings. And it's a lease I've modified extensively from Dave, but I can't really give it out because it was one of his. But there are leases in books. There are leases in usually in stationery stores. I know that sounds funny. There's downloadable ones for each state. And you want to make sure that the one you use has a lead disclosure and it covers all the clauses that are in your state. So I suggest if you have your own form that you want to use that has very important clauses in it, you then go get a lease for your state and just make sure that you've incorporated the clauses that are specific for your state into your lease so that you're covered. You do not have to use the form that's done by the local realtors. They use that form just because it's convenient for them, and it covers actually the real estate agent more than it covers the tenant or the landlord. So sometimes you can go to your local, like I said, a bookstore or car form or realtor's office and just buy a stack of forms and use those, especially if it's on legal paper or something. But I like the ones on Word or a word processor like Pages, because then you can just add in things that you want to. Then you need a condition report. So a condition report is where the person's going to go through the house and check off whether things in good condition or there's a scratch in the wall or something's missing or a faucet doesn't work. they're going to go through the house with a fine-tooth comb when they move in to make sure there's nothing wrong with it, because later, if they don't check that off, you can hold them responsible for that type of repair. So they're very motivated in the first couple weeks to do that. They won't really do it much after that. So make sure you collect that the day they move in, and you provide the form for them. We'll talk in another later when I talk about the binder deposit specifically for out-of-state properties, and we can work on the specific leases that we use and the condition report. So that's the order of things that you need to do to find a good tenant. In one of the future shows, I'm going to talk about what do you do when your tenant's not so good. In other words, how to get rid of the bad tenants so you can find a good tenant to replace them with, especially if you buy a property with a tenant in place and you're just going to have to get rid of that tenant anyway. So I'm going to check the chat room, see if there's any questions there. Nobody had any questions for the day. You can go ahead and post those if you want. I'm going to, now that that other form's been up, I'm going to change the form that we have so that you guys can get the ebook as well. I'm going to post that up for a few minutes. So if you need to find private lenders for your real estate investing, go ahead and click on the ebook. That's at wisewealthuniversity.com/PV lending if you're watching on YouTube. So let me get back to the last slide here. So once you've gotten into the mode of finding good tenants, hopefully you can keep this going and you can rinse and repeat, and your tenants are going to be your cash flow and your income from your properties, and that will serve you for the rest of your lifetime as you build up your rental portfolio. So if you follow those steps, then go ahead and rinse and repeat, and you'll be on your way to a great cash flow and retirement. So I'm going to check just for a sec over here, see if there's any other questions on some of the other pages there. And let me check Facebook, checked Google Plus. All right, I think that's good. Oh, I'm going to share with you the page, Mr. Landlord, and show you how this works. So I'm going to stop that for a second and share out the other page, Mr. Landlord. Really great resource for everyone here. All right, so MrLandlord.com. There's, of course, no period after Mr., and it's not spelled out Mr., it's MRLandlord.com. You can get a lot of forms there, very state specific. He also has a boot camp. I think he runs it once a year. So there's a lot of freebies. If you go to the freebies, you'll be able to get some of the forms, state-specific rental forms. So that would be good for you. And they also have an automated rent. If your tenant has a bank account, you could collect rent online. And of course, credit checks. And that is, here we go. This is where you request a credit report. I usually get the $14 one, the credit and eviction, because I want to know if they've been evicted. And sometimes I do the $25 one, which is why you're collecting that fee from them right on the application. So sign up and register. Like I said, they will do a check for you, and you have to have a service agreement with them, which I do. And they'll want to know, they might come and do a site search if you have an office, but they want to know that your computer's password protected, things like that. So that is a way for a regular landlord who is not a realtor to do credit checks. Okay, MrLandlord.com, and check his state-specific leases that he has for you to use. I think, yep, you can just go ahead and here's all the applications and forms you might need. The rental application form. Sometimes you have to put in a salary verification form to find out, and you have a lead paint disclosure that you can give to them. The inventory list is like the condition form that I mentioned before. And then they also have a thing for a security deposit, so that if you're not giving them back the full security deposit, you can itemize why you're not doing that. All right. Let's see if you're in one of the other states here. Let me go for Phoenix. Oh, that's right. That would be Arizona. Sorry. I'm so used to thinking about Phoenix. So here's the Arizona one, and it has pretty much the same forms. And let me go for Nevada, because that's another close state where people have rentals. Again, all the same forms there. And a lot of people have rentals in Florida. Same type of thing, all right? A lead disclosure, a welcome letter. It's going to be pretty much the same thing. Let's look at the application form. Okay, you can get a package available, or, you can just get the form that you want. So those are some forms. That's where you can get some forms. Go to mrlandlord.com. All right. I want to thank you, everyone, for coming to the Hangout tonight. We do this every Thursday night, and I welcome all real estate investors. Please invite your friends, share the Hangout with other people, and like I said, invite your friends, post it, where you hang out in social media, Facebook, Twitter, and let people know about this, because it's great free education and training. And I always love to interact with people. So if people do want to post questions in the chat, please go ahead and do that. And you can also email me during the week if there's questions that you would like. Sometimes I post I think it's a survey, and ask people what questions they have. And then I'll hold those all and do a Q&A for real estate investors. I do that one a couple times a year, where you're really letting me know your questions so I can get those answered for you. So thank you all for coming tonight, and I'll see you next Thursday. We're going to be doing a show with Robert McPhee about bringing money into your business and into your real estate business specifically. So we've been playing a game on Facebook called the Prosperity Game, and I've invited a lot of people to join. Hopefully I'll invite you on the next one. And we've met a lot of really cool people. The Prosperity Game lets you realize the limiting beliefs you have about money coming into your life and coming into your business. So anyway, next week we'll talk with Robert. And the week after that, I think we have a mortgage person lined up to talk with us, and a couple of other flippers who we'll be talking to later in the summer. So I've got all the schedules set up for you to come hear those great interviews. All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm going to play my outgoing video. And if you're on YouTube later, you won't see it, because it's really just a blank screen on YouTube, but I try to cut that out. So thank you, everyone, and good night. Have a great summer weekend. Good night, everyone.